Hello, and welcome back to the weekly astrology podcast, where we weave the astrology transits of the week into the rhythm of the lunar cycle. I am your host, Sarah Paasch, and if you've been with us in the previous weeks, thank you. Thank you for returning and coming back every week. It's so wonderful to have this community growing with me together. And if you're new to this podcast, welcome. Welcome to this little virtual space where hopefully as we explore the astrology transits together, it sets us up so that we can really work with the astrology, whether we feel like it's good astrology or difficult astrology. No matter what, I truly believe astrology can be used to help us and to bring us together. So thank you for being here. This is a week where we are diving into a completely new lunar cycle. We just finally ended last week those big squares between Jupiter and the Sun in Cancer to Saturn and Neptune in Aries. And if you were here with us, you know that these were true tests. They were challenges and confrontations that were inviting us into some very, very important and grounded considerations about the major changes that we're all going through. And as Jupiter and the Sun made those squares to Saturn and Neptune, I'm curious if any lessons that seem kind of new, or maybe new themes or characters, are starting to reveal themselves around what this 3-year Saturn and Aries transit is really hoping to be about for you. Is this something that you're feeling overwhelmed by, or you're feeling ready for? Are you ready to say yes to the Saturn transit? I'm really excited to share with you that no matter where you are on that spectrum, currently I am doing a special reading for specifically Saturn and how to work with Saturn. And during this reading, we really dive into, first of all, understanding Saturn in your natal chart. What was Saturn doing when you were born? And what is the native promise of Saturn in your birth chart? And also, what are some constructive practical tools and ways that you can work with Saturn to really get the most out of really any Saturn transit? But we're going to be focusing a lot in these readings on the Saturn and Aries transit and anything in Aries that you have that Saturn is going to be activating. So if you're somebody who is astro curious or maybe a little bit Saturn scared, go ahead. You can find that information for that special reading linked below. It feels like the Gemini lunar cycle before was really this giant inhale. There was an influx of new transits, of planets ingressing into new signs, which brought new introductions, new discoveries, maybe new confrontations or challenges. It was a very transitional month with a lot of movement in that mutable air sign. And now we're shifting into Cancer and the Cancer new moon. And we've got those major squares to Saturn and Neptune just behind us. And so really, I feel like this Cancer lunar cycle is an incredible turning point. And hopefully the beginning with this Cancer new moon, we can feel a sort of invitation to finally exhale. This cycle still has some really exciting new things and new transits happening. We've got Uranus that's going to be entering into Gemini for the first time during this lunar cycle, which I can't wait to dive into. There's going to be a very important and pivotal Mercury retrograde in Leo. And then also Saturn and Neptune are going to get the closest together that they will until February 2026 to that conjunction this cycle this month, before both Saturn and Neptune station retrograde in Aries. So yes, this is a big month. There is still some inhale energy, but overall, this Cancer lunar cycle, it does feel more grounded. It does feel a little bit more settled, hopefully, for all of us in some ways. So let's go ahead and dive in. On Wednesday, June 25th, we're going to have that Cancer new moon at 4 degrees of Cancer. I really feel like this is one of the best lunations of the entire year. And I'm going to tell you why, but I want you first to just consider that there's a moment of magic that's coming and being seeded at the time of this Cancer new moon when this episode comes out, that I really want to invite you and encourage you to create some space to really work with, set intentions, and ritualize how we're beginning this Cancer lunar cycle. The first reason is because the moon in Cancer is in domicile. This is the place where the moon is naturally at home, resourced, feels really dignified to do what it's here to do. And what is the moon here to do? The moon is our luminary responsible for relationship. The moon is the great connector in astrology. It is the body that brings us into our emotional feelings and needs and instincts. The moon is here to help us cultivate a sense of security and safety and the kind of belonging that really connects with us on a deeper, intimate level. The messy kind of love, right? That sees all sides of us and makes us feel safe and valued. And when the moon is in Cancer, it's like the moon has all of its resources to provide us that place of security, to provide us that nurturing that we need for the development of each phase of growth and healing. Just hours before this Cancer new moon on Wednesday, we had Jupiter conjunct the sun. This is called a Jupiter Cazimi. And this is the moment when Jupiter sets a completely new cycle or synodic cycle with the sun. Jupiter is in a place of renewal and rebirth and regeneration. So not only do we have Jupiter in exaltation starting its new cycle, we also have this Cancer new moon conjunct Jupiter. Jupiter is the planet that we call one of the greater benefics, and that means that Jupiter is one of the good bringers. Jupiter likes to bring us opportunity, growth, expansion. And when Jupiter's in Cancer once every 12 years, Jupiter gets a little boost in its ability to bring those and deliver the good in our lives. And with this new moon sitting in conjunction with Jupiter in Cancer, who was just renewed in that Cazimi hours before, it gives a boost to the power of this new moon and any seeds that we set for intention that we want to grow starting from now. Another important piece of the astrology for this Cancer new moon is that the first aspects that this new moon is going to make is a sextile to Mars in Virgo, and then a sextile to Venus in Taurus. Sextiles are of the nature of Venus. They are supportive and relational. They create harmony and momentum through collaboration and synergy. And so when we look at the first aspects that this new moon makes, these supportive aspects to Mars and Venus in these earth signs, there is this indication of moving forward with harmony in a grounded way, resourcing our partnerships, our people, our collaborations, and finding some slow and steady integration and forward momentum. So with all of that in mind, the kind of mantra or theme for this Cancer new moon for me was teamwork makes the dream work. Really, the most magic that can be made when we start this Cancer lunar cycle is for those who are willing to help and to be helped. This is tapping into a strength of vulnerability and really having this intention of coming together when and where and how we can. The Gemini new moon was this influx, this inhale of transitions and rearrangements, new ideas and introductions. And now the Cancer cycle is a time where we are intending to weave together all of these new connections and changes in order to deepen our sense of security and safety. So if you are somebody who likes to work with new moons and ritualize by setting intentions, journaling, reflecting, then I really encourage you to start by connecting to this space within yourself with the awareness of everything that's changing and shifting, and to really ask yourself, when I envision this ideal of home, what does that mean to me? What does it mean to feel at home, both with myself and within my place, my environment, my people, my relationships? What are the things that I'm really desiring to cultivate? What are the things that I recognize I need to really nourish myself in the direction of change in which I'm growing into? Another helpful question and prompt to really live with while we've got Jupiter in Cancer over the next year, and maybe opening that dialogue at this new moon, is what would it take to expand my capacity to say yes? To say yes to more of what feeds me, what helps me to feel genuine personal satisfaction and joy, safety and security. While there is definitely a large variability of the transits happening in our world and our sky and our personal lives, this Jupiter in Cancer is one of the pieces to the cosmic puzzle that if we really tune into, we can really leverage to gain even greater support for the foundations that we're cultivating. So again, what would it take to expand my capacity to say yes? To expand my ability to be available, to catch the waves of good that want to uplift me and carry me forward. May we all allow this Cancer new moon to be a moment that both softens and strengthens us, that opens us and brings us back together into an even greater sense of connection and community. After that Cancer new moon on Wednesday, the remainder of this new moon phase and this week's astrology is really a week for Mercury, which tells us that the first phase of this lunar cycle is really focused on all of Mercury's messages, information, conversations, anything that we are negotiating, maybe a contract that we're negotiating or big decisions that we're making. The highlight of this first week after that new moon is everything related to Mercury. Beginning on Thursday, June 26th, we're going to have two things happening. Mercury in Cancer is going to be making a sextile to Uranus and Taurus at 29 degrees. And the same day, the sun in Cancer is going to sextile Mars in Virgo. And the way that I really feel the combination of these things happening on the same day is, again, this leading with vulnerability and emotional honesty is what's really going to stimulate our momentum in collaborative decisions and actions as we move forward. So let's break these down individually. We're going to start with Mercury in Cancer sextile Uranus and Taurus. This is happening at 29 degrees, so the anaretic degree of these signs, the last degree before each planet is going to leave and enter new territory, a new sign. And Mercury in Cancer has a really nostalgic, emotional feeling and tone to its messaging. Mercury in Cancer sextile Uranus and Taurus feels like a breakthrough that could happen through having a really open, emotionally vulnerable conversation with somebody. The more that we can speak from a place of feeling and what we need, the more likely Uranus can offer us that sense of liberation or breakthrough. If there was a place where we were feeling stuck, Uranus can really give us a new creative solution or option that we weren't previously seeing. But it's almost like the other person that has that information or that option to help us can't resource us if we're not willing to come from that Cancerian vulnerable place. So really being willing to be honest and to really speak from a place of heart and feeling can support this sextile. Another way that I was thinking about Mercury sextile Uranus at this last degree was this communication bridge between what's ending and what's beginning. And when I say the word bridges, I'm referring to that focal point of the 29th degree that the sextile is happening between Mercury and Uranus. This really tells us that there is something coming to the end of a matter. We are coming into an agreement or decision point. There's a conversation that's happening right before we enter into the new change or the new place or the new thing. And so what is the final conversation that needs to happen? Or who do we need to establish a connection bridge of communication that's kind of holding the space of what we're leaving that can tether us through this transition as we move forward? So to think about establishing these communication bridges, maybe with somebody from your past that would be supportive to help you as you transition into the future, or maybe it's somebody from the future who can help you make that final step out from the past. Don't be afraid in this Mercury-Uranus transit to put your heart on your sleeve and to really say and express how much you care about somebody. And that second transit on Thursday morning, the sun in Cancer making a sextile to Mars in Virgo. This really feels like energy of tag teaming, when we really stimulate the effort and alliance of the people who are really helping us put everything in its place in these new places and these new things we're doing. This is a moment of really coming together and saying, okay, we're on the same team. How can we delegate these efforts? What is it that we can do? How can we work together and really organize our shared purpose and efforts so that we can start to move forward and feel like real progress is possible? This sun sextile Mars in Virgo reminds me of how much I love working with a Virgo. You know, when you're working with that coworker where you don't even have to ask for them to do the next step of the process, where you're both completely working on your own independently without communicating at all, and everything is just seamlessly getting done. This is like one of those moments. It's like this shared independence or this interdependence. The collaboration and the synergy and momentum between the sun and Mars is recognizing and really forming a greater alliance with the people who are on our level, who are matching our efforts and also matching that bigger purpose, right? Like, what is it that we're really here to do and what really matters? What is that objectable outcome that we're working towards? And together, we can get so much more done, and it can be so much less stress when we're willing to delegate or define roles of responsibilities between everybody on this team. So when we think about the combination of these transits on Thursday, I don't know, is there some sort of emotionally vulnerable conversation that you've been putting off that if you consider having and initiate could actually lead to a greater sense of teamwork and inspiration and collaboration, where now there's this energy and readiness to really move forward together? Like suddenly you have help that you haven't been using, but it's been there the whole time. Now it's like we're tapping into that help. And that's kind of that Uranus part of the equation too, right? Uranus feels like a shock. It's disruptive, it's unexpected. But this feels more like it's there, you just weren't using it or seeing it because maybe you weren't allowing anybody else around you to recognize the help that you were needing. So definitely not the day to try to do everything yourself. Definitely not the day to hide how you're feeling or what you're needing. And definitely not the day to close yourself off from the possibility that there might be people to help you and it might be easier than you expected or predicted. And then later Thursday evening, Mercury is going to shift into Leo, where it's going to have an extended stay. We've got a retrograde coming up here. And the same time that Mercury goes into Leo, the moon is going with Mercury, which I love. It's just a repetition and continuation of these same things. This like collaboration, this teamwork, this we've got each other, we can do this together energy that's happening. Mercury is going to be in Leo from June 26th until September 2nd. Mercury in Leo with this retrograde coming up is really going to put a focus on leadership, on the roles of responsibility, like who's in charge here, who's in charge for what, and what are my expectations for my part of the puzzle. Overall, it feels like a fairly light Mercury retrograde cycle. I say that because Mercury's only aspects during that retrograde are going to be a sextile to Venus, a conjunction Cazimi with the sun halfway through the retrograde, and then following the retrograde, Mercury is going to sextile Mars twice because of its change in speed. And so while we'll have to see how it actually plays out in our lived experience, the way that it looks on astrology paper is that it's really going to be a time where we can use Mercury retrograde in the ways that can be the most constructive. There's this kind of like lack of distraction or noise around what Mercury retrograde really needs us to figure out or reconfigure during that retrograde. So I'll get into all of that when we get to that Mercury retrograde later in this cycle. But I just want to foreshadow that there's a part of what I feel when I look at this that feels like this really has the potential to be a helpful, supportive, and a little bit softer Mercury retrograde. But before we get there, we got to talk about what's happening here and now, Mercury's big weekend in the final days of this week. This weekend on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, in that order, Mercury in Leo is going to make a trine to Saturn in Aries, a trine to Neptune in Aries, and then an opposition to Pluto retrograde in Aquarius. We have to ask ourselves, what right now, with the clarity that we have, the picture that's coming into fullness now, can I ultimately agree to, confirm, say yes to, or say no and release? Knowing and holding in our awareness that these agreements, these decisions, they might be a little bit of a rough draft of the finality that concludes later in the year. And I say that because Mercury is going to station retrograde in Leo, not again aspecting these outer planets from Leo. And then by the time it gets into a place where it will aspect those planets, we're in eclipse season. And really, it's after that eclipse cycle when we get to Mercury in Libra and end of September, when Mercury starts participating in these grand air trines with the outer planets. That's when I feel like we're really going to have the clear green light. This is yes, let's go. So the more that we can hold what we're agreeing to or what we're coming into clarity with a little bit of flexibility and equanimity, a patience and maturity, and knowing that there's developments that are going to unfold and take place that we need to happen in order to inform us of what it is that we're going to really clearly, no going back, say yes or no to. So I guess all that to say, this weekend when Mercury trines Saturn and Neptune and opposes Pluto and Aquarius, don't be afraid to come to an agreement or to say yes. And also, how can you cushion yourself to not lock yourself in for too much of a long-term commitment? Is there a way in which you can negotiate a sort of flexibility in the contract or in the agreement with the intention of living through experience and gathering more information and understanding and clarity around where you're going and how everything is going to fit and work together with that? Because we just don't want to forget that Uranus hasn't entered Gemini yet by the time this weekend's transits happen. So that means there's a lot of information we don't even have yet. We've never had access to. I will say the thing that's really working for Mercury in these transits is that it's making a trine aspect to Saturn and Neptune and Aries. This is said to be of the nature of Jupiter. So trines are very stabilizing. They have long-term resourcing and benefits. And so there is this sort of benefic nature to the conversation and negotiations that Mercury's in. And also Mercury is able to provide information that helps Saturn and Neptune and Aries as well. Like whatever transit we're going to be going through and growing through with that Saturn, Neptune, and Aries, this Mercury aspecting both Saturn and Neptune on the weekend, it's illuminating or offering some sort of messaging to tell us, hey, these are the things that you're going to have to think about, or you're going to have to think differently about in order to show up for what's coming up in your Aries part of your chart and your life. The consideration of Mercury opposing Pluto, which happens on Sunday, June 29th, is a little bit different. When we think about Mercury and Pluto in a hard aspect, so either a conjunction, a square, or an opposition, we can sometimes see some of the more difficult expressions of Mercury-Pluto come through. And some of those things are power struggles in our conversations or our communications and contract negotiations. Another thing is getting really stuck in unhelpful rumination. So overthinking, obsessing over a certain idea or belief that you have or opinion that you have. Because it's an opposition, there seems to be more of a relational component to this transit with Mercury and Pluto. So it's something that we really need to take a step back and consider. And we can leverage those trines to Saturn, Neptune, and Aries, right? Like what in Aries and our lessons there can actually bolster and support us to be more effective in whatever Mercury-Pluto needs to work through and come to an agreement on. What does empowered communication look like that promotes safety for transparency on all parts? Mercury-Pluto at the end of the day, the best thing that it can deliver is truth that cuts through all of the bullshit, that reveals everything that needs to be revealed in order to actually move forward in a way that is going to thrive. And if we shut down in moments of difficult conversations because of tension, because of difficult emotions, or maybe past events that trigger memories that we project onto this conversation and negotiation, we shut down the opportunity to evolve and empower each other and this conversation to help and support all of us in moving forward. And so one thing that I'm always cautioning my clients who are going through these Mercury-Pluto transits personally is to really make sure that you're very, very clear on what is your intention going into this conversation that does not just revolve around you, your feelings, your needs. You need to tap into a greater, higher will intention that is connected to a sense of equality and fairness for everybody. And if you enter a conversation with this defensive armor, this unwillingness to compromise, you will not win this Pluto-Mercury battle, You might, in the beginning, in a corrupt misuse of that Plutonic energy, but ultimately, Pluto destroys anything that does not actually sustain or really nourish evolution and thriving. So, again, just to kind of summarize, this weekend with these transits with Mercury, really asking yourself, what are the decisions that are sitting on the table or the conversations that I really see clearly need to be had and need to be made before we can move forward? Ultimately, what is the long-term outcome that is my intention, not just for myself, but for everybody? How does that intention tether to what is good for everybody? And am I afraid to compromise? Am I going into any conversation, any negotiation, or any decision with an already defensive armor of not wanting or being willing to compromise? So hopefully by the end of this first week of the Cancer lunar cycle, Mercury can help deliver us to a clear starting point, a soft landing, and an opportunity to share and collaborate on important decisions that need to be made as we move forward. I'm going to be bringing on a special guest for next week's episode, and I'm so excited for you to meet her. She's an amazing astrologer. I'm not going to tell you who she is until she gets here. I know. And next week is going to be all about that Uranus entering Gemini. And we're also going to do a fun little happy hour podcast episode for you because while Mercury was the star of the show this week, Venus is the star of our show next week. If you want to be here for that happy hour episode, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for this channel. Thank you everybody so much who was here with me today on this episode. I'm so excited to continue just speaking with you every week about the astrology that's happening and how we can, live through these transits and grow through the transits together. I really appreciate your support. If you like this podcast or this episode, it supports my channel so much if you like this video, if you leave a comment, or you share it with anybody you think might be helped in hearing it. I have everything linked below on ways that you can connect with me. You can book readings or consultations with me, as well as reach me on different platforms like Instagram and social media. I'm wishing everybody a safe, a warm, and a cozy and nourishing, connected Cancer new moon. May we all enter this cycle together with hope in our hearts and wisdom in our minds. See you next week.